Welcome back to Deb's True Crime Notebook. We have an interview from Nick McClelland, prosecutor of Carroll County, all about the Richard Allen case. Grab a cup of coffee. It's a long one, but it is well worth it. Thank you to Amy Graham McCarty of the Carroll County Comment for this interview. Carroll County Prosecutor Nicholas McClelland spoke to Carroll County Comment Friday. His first interview since the gag order was lifted in the Delphi double murder case. This is part of the continued series of first-hand perspectives from those closest to the case by journalist Amy Graham McCarty. 7 letters prolonged the investigation into the person responsible for killing Abigail Williams and Liberty German. Written in red on a tip sheet with information on tip number 74 was the word cleared. That one word allowed Richard Allen's self-reported tip to be filed away until 2022. A year earlier in 2021, Carroll County Prosecutor Nicholas McClelland says investigators circled back to review the nearly 20,000 tips received in the case. Allen of Delphi was convicted and sentenced for the murders of Abby and Libby. He confessed more than 60 times to killing the girls. For 2 years, McClelland and later his team of deputy prosecutors, including Stacey Diener and James Luttrell Jr., has remained tight-lipped about the case, considering a gag order placed in December 2022 by Special Judge Fran Gull. With the gag order lifted December 20th, 2024, he is allowed to speak. After nearly a year of reviewing tips, Kathy Schenk, a retired Division of Family and Children worker and investigative team volunteer, revisited tip number 74. Allen's self-reported tip placed him on the Monon High Bridge on February 13, 2017, the day the girls went missing. This tip had information from Allen that he saw 3 girls on the trails between 1:30 to 3:30 p.m. Allen told Indiana Conservation Officer Dan Doolin he was wearing clothing similar to a man recorded by Libby following the girls across the bridge and instructing them to go down the hill. That man was dubbed Bridge Guy. It wasn't misfiled. It wasn't lost because Allen's name was entered as Richard Allen Whiteman in the tip database. The reason we didn't find it was because on the tip someone wrote cleared. So we put it in the file that it was cleared. McClelland said the file was marked accordingly. In 2021, we had a meeting with all law enforcement and said, let's go back and review every tip and see if we missed something. Kathy had the wherewithal to read the tip and say, hey, this guy was on the trail that day. I've never read a tip with the name Richard Allen. This is important. Schenk took the tip to now Sheriff Tony Liggett. It clicked that this is the guy that everybody saw, and here we are, McClelland said. If there is a hero in the part of the story, it is Kathy Schenk and Tony Liggett. McClelland said learning of the tip left him with a mix of emotions. It was a roller coaster, he said. No one knows who cleared Allen's tip in 2017. We don't know to this day who wrote cleared. There have been thousands of tips and tons of people working on it. The tip that was entered had cleared written in red on it. He said, it doesn't matter what his name was filed under. The point is someone wrote cleared on the tip. I've heard a lot of podcasts where they blame Dan Doolin, and Dan Doolin is a good officer. He is thorough. He's a good officer. I don't think we should focus on blame. We should focus on Kathy having the wherewithal to bring it to the law enforcement. Schenk, he said, spent 8 to 15 hours a day volunteering her time because she loves the community of Delphi and she wanted to help. The only thing she is missing is an S on her chest for Superman because she is a hero, he said. Once law enforcement determined Allen was a viable suspect, McClelland said he did not get excited. I've been working on this case for 7 years in February, starting a year after Abby and Libby died, he said. It was 6 years of highs and lows. Hey, we got this person, and hey, we got this tip. We would ride the roller coaster up the hill, and it would be a huge letdown. When investigators told him Allen was a suspect, McClelland said to himself, "I'm not going to ride this roller coaster again. Let's see how this develops. I was a defense attorney for 9 years before I was a prosecutor, so my initial reaction to everything is, all right, prove it," he said. "I put that on investigators and law enforcement. I do that every time I get a case. I say, all right, prove it." When law enforcement gathered evidence from Allen's home on October 22, 2022, during the execution of a search warrant, something was missing. McClelland said investigators could not find the phone Allen was using in 2017. On that phone, there may have been potential evidence that could further connect Allen to the girls' murders. Had he gathered his phone 5 years before he was arrested, he might have gathered more information, he said. He had a collection of phones dating back to 1998, but he didn't have that phone. He said he didn't know if he had that phone or not. He said his wife may have recycled it, but that was a big piece of evidence that was missing and a missed opportunity to collect. Had he followed up in 2017, we would have had a plethora of information on where he was, what he was doing, and all those things. The missing phone was important, McClelland believes. Allen kept in his possession phones dating back to 1998 leading up to the phone he was using in 2017. He also had phones in his possession that were used immediately following the phone he was using in 2017 and beyond. I don't know if it was big to the jury, but it was big to me, he said. I mapped out the release dates of the phones with Christopher Cecil, looking at when phones were released. We know he had a phone for at least this long, so the next phone would be the next release date. There were obvious gaps around the time around the murder where he had the phone after and before, but not at the time of the murder. It could have been a coincidence, but that was odd. That's where we found ourselves. For McClelland, looking back over the trial, he admits there are a few things he would do differently. Obviously, the tip being overlooked for 5 years is huge and unfortunate, he said. It's not huge for trying the case, but it's a huge thing for the family. We had to go an additional 5 years. That's a big deal. And we can't blame anyone because we don't know who wrote cleared on the tip sheet. The only other thing I would do is I would have someone testify about the pattern of life of Richard Allen while he was in jail. What did he do day to day to have more impact for the confessions? Having an account of Allen's behaviors and actions leading up to and following his 60-plus confessions could have helped show the jury Allen did not make those due to being psychotic, he said. I don't know how much weight jurors put into confessions, he said. Obviously, they carried a lot of weight to us because I'm not sure why someone would confess to something they didn't do. I think it would have more impact if we showed his day-to-day activities and showed that when he made confessions, he was at a normal behavior. I think we could have done a better job of that. Some of Allen's confessions, in the form of phone calls to his wife, Kathy, and mother, Janice Allen, were played for the jury during the trial. We played phone calls showing how he is talking about the weather, asking how mom is, how dad is doing, how are you, how's the cat, how's the dog, and then he says, Kathy, I just need you to know that I did this, he said. There are 700 to 800 phone calls. We couldn't play them all. That would be too much for the jury. The phone calls before and after, we should have played those to show this is normal. This is not under duress, and these confessions are legitimate, at least in my mind. When asked about why he believed in the same call Allen would confess his guilt and then ask, what if I did it? And say to his wife, I think I did it, McClelland said he believed it was because Allen did not get the reaction he'd hoped for. If I confess to killing and I've talked to my number one, which for him was Kathy, and you don't get the reaction you expect, think about it. He said he cares what she thinks. I'm using common sense and life experience, but I think we've all been in a situation where we don't get the reaction that we wanted and we feel that awkward silence. I'm not a conspiracy theory guy. I don't buy into that. I buy into the most obvious answer is the right one. I know the facts of the evidence we have and use my life experience to evaluate a situation. When I see something, I call a spade a spade. I look for the most straightforward answer. The question many have asked over the last nearly 8 years since Abby and Libby went for that hike on the Monon High Bridge Trail is why and how. How is the question I've been asked the most, McClelland said. I asked them, have you ever had a gun pointed at you? And how would you react if you did? That's a unique experience that's not many people have had or will ever experience. Most people are kind, gentle people. When someone points a gun at you and says, do this, I have never had that happen to me, but I have an idea of how a 13 or 14-year-old would react. Individuals took to social media and YouTube to discuss the merits of the case, some speaking on authority on Allen's innocence and guilt. I would sit back and say, if you only knew the whole story. McClelland said of the comments made online about the case, I'm very much the person that I am not going to go to TV before a game and say, I'm going to win this, rate me as the underdog and play the game. Though social media didn't bother the prosecutor, he said he hoped people would take into consideration what their comments do to the families. I would always think, do you realize what effect this has on the family? That is the big issue for me because I know the family, he said. Carroll County is known for being a tight-knit community where neighbors help neighbors. It is also not unusual for familial connections as generations continue to reside in the area. McClelland said he never let those connections cloud his judgment. If that weighed into my decision-making, then I would not be able to be a prosecutor, he said. It is not just this case. In every case, I know the mom, the dad, I graduated with the sister or the brother. It is such a small community. I know 70% of the people I prosecuted in one way or another. It had no effect besides it being more heartbreaking because I knew the girls before they died. I know their family. Their family knew my family. It's just a small community. I was born and raised here, and I feel very loyal to Carroll County. McClelland said, like many in the community, his interaction with Allen and his wife Kathy were minimal before he became a suspect in the murders of Abby and Libby. Nothing besides going to CVS and Richard checking me out at the register, he said, of their interaction. Back when he was there, he did not have self-checkouts. Richard and Kathy Allen were pretty low-key members of the community. They weren't doing anything to bring attention to themselves. Steve Mullen. Investigator Steve Mullen joined McClelland at the prosecutor's office and assisted with the case. He's more than an employee, he's also a friend. McClelland says he is hurt by the defense's accusations that Mullen is corrupt. Steve Mullen is a devout Christian. When the defense said he lied, that affected him in a personal way, he said. To call him a liar if you know him is just inappropriate. To say he lied, cheated, would steal, or is corrupt is inappropriate. He is one of the most honest guys I know. There's no other guy more devout than he is, and to call him corrupt, that cuts him to the core because he is not that person. Threats against one's character are uncalled for, McClelland said, but those are not the only threats his office have received. The threats are always indirect, he said. There is a guy in California who messages and says, looks like I have to come slash your tires. I get innocuous threats. You get people that say, what if this happens to your 2 little girls? What if I came to Indiana to do this to your girls? It's a threat. It's not direct, but it's still a threat in a roundabout way. Most of the threats and negative comments, he said, are coming from individuals outside of Carroll County community. If there was any evidence McClelland says he was surprised by during the 17-day trial, it was when the defense's digital expert, Stacey Eldridge, a former FBI forensic examiner and certified mobile device examiner, testified that something was inserted into Libby's cell phone headphone jack at approximately 5:45 p.m., February 13, 2017, and removed at 10:32 p.m. the same evening. Did the state expect that testimony? No, McClelland said. The defense did a good job of hiding what they were going to use in court. When I heard it, I thought, that doesn't make sense. We saw it in the log, but again, it didn't make sense. It just didn't make sense. If there was any evidence McClelland says he was surprised by during the 17-day trial, it was when the defense's digital expert, Stacey Eldridge, a former FBI forensic examiner and certified mobile device examiner, testified that something was inserted into Libby's cell phone headphone jack at approximately 5:45 p.m., February 13, 2017, and removed at 10:32 p.m. the same evening. Did the state expect that testimony? No, McClelland said. The defense did a good job of hiding what they were going to use in court. When I heard it, I thought, that doesn't make sense. We saw it in the log, but again, it didn't make sense. It just didn't make sense. We gave those logs to the defense, so we knew it was there. I did not know their expert was going to give that explanation, so that caught me by surprise. The state's digital expert, ISP First Sergeant Christopher Cecil, examined Libby's phone and extracted data from it on multiple occasions. Christopher Cecil, what an amazing ISP officer. The intelligence, that guy, and the knowledge of the digital forensic he knows his stuff, McClelland said. We spent hours and hours and hours together. I believe the defense thought that this was the reasonable doubt they needed. Whether the jury agreed or not, they didn't buy into it. McClelland said with everything the state knew, common sense told them it was not possible someone physically plugged in a set of headphones in the port of Libby's phone and removed it at the time the defense indicated. As Eldridge remained on the stand, Cecil got to work trying to figure out a logical explanation as to what could have happened. He searched Google and was directed to an Apple tech help site. Libby's phone was an Apple iPhone 6. It's not the ideal situation, McClelland said of the Google search. I think Jennifer Auger did a good job of saying this is not ideal police work. You don't just do a Google search, but when you are put in a situation and the defense does trial by surprise, that's what you get. Noting the oddity of the search and its timing, McClelland said he still stands by the information. As reliable as Google searches go, I think it was reliable, and again, what he found was common sense. Jennifer Auger did a good job in saying you don't use Google for a trial. You're right, we don't, but when you spring this on us and don't tell us ahead of time, this is what you get. To me, it's just common sense explanation. The defense objected to Cecil citing his findings from Google in court, calling it hearsay. Gohl overruled the objection. I don't think it's hearsay because it is him commenting on the research that he found. McClelland said some of Cecil's testimony is based on research that he had, like the distance of a flight of stairs. He did research. It's no different than that. Auger, McClelland noted, asked Cecil about the distance of a flight of stairs as recorded in Apple Health data. Libby's Apple Health data showed she traveled 2 flights of stairs between Allen telling the girls to go down the hill and when they were murdered. The Apple Health data extracted from Libby's phone was very significant, he said. Whether right or wrong, I bought into the Apple Health data and what it said. When you put into the proper context all of the evidence we had, the Apple Health data coincides with all the data he had. He said, the fact the phone didn't move from 2:32 p.m. was big. As to why Allen would leave critical evidence behind is anyone's guess, McClelland said. What goes through a person's mind when he kills 2 little girls? What goes through his mind after? I have no idea, he said. Common sense says, why leave the phone behind if you knew it was there? I have no idea. What he believes is that Abby purposefully hid the phone from her killer. It was not until crime scene investigators moved Abby's body to process the scene that they found Libby's phone under a shoe under Abby's body. But for Abby, holy cow, the phone was a huge piece of evidence, he said. She's a hero in her own right. Without Libby's phone, the investigation could have taken much longer, McClelland believes. To me, the video, the location of where it was taken, and the health app data are big pieces of evidence, he said. The video was powerful. If you think about the past 8 years, what is the one thing you've seen in the media these past 8 years? Evidence from that phone. It was huge to me. Sealing records. Except for video recorded by Libby on High Bridge on February 13, 2017, McClelland asked Gull to seal court records in the case, his reasoning Richard Allen's best interest. I wanted a fair trial for Richard Allen. I felt like if everything was out to the public, we would taint the jury pool. This is why I was very tight-lipped about talking to anyone, he said. I believe in our system, whether you like it or not. I believe in it. I did it so we could have a fair jury. I did it to protect him. No one is going to believe that, but that is why I did it. The Franks Memorandum. Keeping information from the public only lasted so long. The defense would file their first of several Franks Memorandum in the case in September 2023. The court document, 136 pages in length, provided details on the crime scene, including evidence that had never been revealed to the public. A cartridge found between the bodies of the girls that had been discharged from a Sig Sauer gun, and the defense's belief members of a Norse pagan religion murdered the girls as part of a ritualistic killing. I appreciate his perspective, but I don't agree with it, McClelland said of the defense attorney Andrew Baldwin, telling media recently legally they could not file the Franks Memorandum confidentially. It just goes back to common sense, McClelland said. We investigated every lead. There's not a lead we did not investigate. We used to say, if the lead has legs, we're going to go with it. That means going down the rabbit hole until we prove it or disprove it. I really think Odinism is a testament to investigators. When you first hear about it, it sounds ridiculous. And our investigators said, nope, we're going to go down the road and investigate. They stayed with it until they disproved it. At the end of the day, I'm glad to charge whoever is responsible for this, but you got to prove it. The defense could not prove it from our evidence, and we couldn't prove it from our evidence. To me, that's the end of the story. A letter. One of the investigators who looked into ritualistic killing was former Rushville Police Chief Todd Click, along with now deceased FBI Task Force Officer Greg Ferenczi and former ISB investigator Kevin Murphy. Click, wanting to be sure McClelland and investigators had thoroughly investigated the Odinist angle, sent him a certified letter after Allen's arrest. If you read over it, it piques your interest, he said of the letter. I brought Todd Click in to talk and said, tell us what you know. There is this theme out there from defense-friendly people that I am corrupt and covering up for people. I would not cover up for anyone who committed this crime. We called Click up and asked him to explain his thoughts. I said, let's talk about it. Give me your best pitch, if you will. We'll investigate it like we did everything. If I went to trial based on what I think happened, I wouldn't win. You have to have evidence to support what you think happened, and we did not have evidence to support that theory. Is it a conspiracy theory that they all came together and committed these crimes and no one is talking? Or is it that Richard Allen was on the bridge that day and decided to kidnap and kill those little girls? What makes more sense? Lost audio. The defense stated during hearings that missing audio of interviews completed by law enforcement of third-party suspects with alleged ties to Norse pagan religion was reckless, if not intentional, by the state. The audio was said to have been recorded over, unbeknownst to investigators. Those interviews are documented in reports, McClelland said. I don't fault the defense for making that an issue. It is regrettable that it happened. It was whether the defense wants to believe the reports. I understand you want to hear the actual words. To me, it wasn't an issue. I understand why the defense wants to make it an issue. I was a defense attorney for a long time. I would have done the same thing. There was nothing of merit to warrant a further investigation into other individuals. Enough to convict. McClelland says he believed from the day he filed the probable cause and arrest warrant in the case that he had enough to convict Allen for killing Abby and Libby. The evidence he considered key was the cartridge found at the crime scene between the girls' bodies. That cartridge was determined to have come from the Sig Sauer P226 handgun recovered from Allen's home when police executed a search warrant in October of 2022. For me, the aha moment for the state was when we got the ballistics report and the bullet matched the gun. I believe in that science. I just believe in it, he said. I didn't have my team together at that time, but I believe the evidence we had was enough for an arrest and probable cause and enough for a conviction, or I would not have filed it. You never know what jurors are going to do. I don't care if you've been practicing for 2 years or 50. If you could read a jury and know what they're going to do, that would be skill we would all like to have. For McClelland, defense attorney Brad Rosie may not have been reading the jury when giving his closing argument. There's a point where in the defense's closing, they showed a rack used for medieval torture. He said, sometimes you go too far and you lose the jury. I could have objected. It was absolutely inappropriate for them to show that. I let it go. Part of trial work is reading the room and seeing how people react. You have to watch the jury and how they are reacting. They are your audience. He was losing them, so I didn't object. I thought, let them go this far. He's going to lose the jury. Van. During the trial, McClelland said Allen confessed to a key piece of evidence that only the killer would know. That information, he said, came in from one Allen's confession to his Indiana Department of Corrections psychologist, Dr. Monica Walla. Allen told Walla he was spooked while he held the girls below the bridge. Allen said he had intended to sexually assault the girls but saw a van. He then chose to take them across Deer Creek and kill them. He doesn't say white van, McClelland said. He says a van. People associate a white van because they see that photo of Brad Weber's van. Carroll County resident Brad Weber lives at the end of the drive that travels under the Monon High Bridge. He testified he was driving a white van home and under the bridge around 2:30 p.m. on February 13, 2017. It has been shared on social media that the information regarding Weber's white van was on the internet, making it easy for Walla to feed the information to Allen during one of the sessions. Was it out on social media? I wasn't following social media, so I have no idea, McClelland said. The state's perspective was we didn't think that anyone knew a van had traveled down the road under the bridge at that time. McClelland said information about the van was learned when the state acquired access to Allen's mental health and medical records from the IDOC. The judge denied the state's request for mental health and medical records twice, saying it was privileged information, he said. The defense brought it up in pleadings, and the judge finally granted it. Walla testified in court that she had followed Allen's case before and after he became her patient. The defense used that information to attack her credibility. I don't know if the jury believed she was reliable or not, McClelland said. We thought she was, and that was why we put her on the stand. If you go with the defense's theory, she made all this up. What does common sense tell you? You go where the evidence leads you. Plea deal. McClelland said he offered Allen a plea deal early on, but Allen declined. There was a plea deal, he said. It wasn't a lucrative deal for Richard Allen. What are you going to offer a guy who kills 2 girls? Leaked photos. When asked if he felt the defense intentionally leaked photos of the crime scene, McClelland said he would respect Gull's ruling. We presented the evidence that we had at the contempt hearing, and the judge found it wasn't intentional, and I respect the judge's decision, he said. When he initially saw photos from the crime scene, he says he became emotional. I got choked up. What if it was your kids? That is what I wanted to say to those who have shared and posted the crime scene photos. Put yourself in the position of the family and imagine seeing your daughter in that state. Just imagine it, he said. I visualized my own 2 girls, and I mean, talk about victimizing the victims. I think Becky Patty said it's best. It's generational. Every time someone Googles it, think of Becky Patty, Derek German, Anna Williams, Carrie Timmons. For them to have to see that in the public, to see it projected. McClelland said the Patty family was delivering food to those standing in line, trying to get a seat in the courtroom during the trial. For them to have that strength to endure the trial, and then people to go that day and badmouth them, they are what we should try to be like, he said. The defense wants to talk about being human. Those are humans. I don't know that I could do that. I think I would be bitter and mean. But again, members of our community, this community, holy cow, there's something else. 4 counts. Due to double jeopardy, Allen could not be sentenced to the 4 counts of murder he was convicted, 2 counts of felony murder and 2 counts of intentional murder. I added intentional murder in January 2023, McClelland said. The felony murder I originally charged him with was because I believed he kidnapped the girls and they died. I had the other 2 counts added because I was at the point where that was appropriate to add because I felt he intentionally killed the girls. You never know what a jury is going to do. You present the evidence you have. I thought we had a strong case. I thought we had the right person that committed the offense. He was presumed innocent until the jury came back. To Richard Allen. McClelland said he has nothing to say to Allen. I don't want to sit down with him, he said. I presented the evidence we had in court. The jury found him guilty. If you believe in the system as I do, what else do I need to hear? What answer could he give to give solace? No answer he could give would justify or make it okay. I was pretty adamant at the press conference. I don't want to say Richard Allen's name ever again. He's the defendant, the convicted. This should be about Abby and Libby and how amazing they were. To the families. McClelland said he admires the family's faith and perseverance over the last 7.5 years. I applaud their strength and their compassion, he said. We should strive to be like them. We really should. What they went through and not to be bitter, they're compassionate in the face of evil. Imagine what the family was feeling. I championed them for being there every day, supporting us and obviously being as cordial and respectful as they were. I'm not sure how I would feel if it were my kid. It takes a village. For years, McClelland worked side by side with investigators, attorneys, and families fighting for justice for Abby and Libby. Quote, I just want everyone to know I did not do this alone, he said. It takes a village. This took a village. Jerry Holman, my staff, Stacy Diener, Jim Luttrell, and Tony Liggett. I could not have done this without their help and support. I deserve and have earned as much praise and gratitude as I'm getting. I could not have done this without them, all the investigators too. And Kathy Shank. Talk about an unsung hero. Say I love you. In his years of working as a defense attorney, McClelland says he has represented some of the worst defendants you can imagine. It never affected me, and then I had kids, he said. You watch them take their first steps, say their first words. There's something about them that I can't explain in words. It made me more emotional. Being a dad of girls makes you kind of wimpy. The biggest effect Abby and Libby's case had on me is every time I see my kids and loved ones, I think I better tell them I love them. When you look at your loved ones, never miss an opportunity to tell them I love you. And there you have it, the interview of Nicholas McClelland, prosecutor for Carroll County. He's discussing the Richard Allen case. This interview was conducted by Amy Graham McCarty of the Carroll County Comet. She did an excellent job. I'm glad I could bring it to you today through YouTube and through audio. And I would recommend that you go find this article and read it and take your time with it. So we'll see you next time on Deb's True Crime Notebook. Don't forget to like, subscribe, ring the bell for all notifications. Share this with your friends and in a group. And leave us a comment. What do you think about the interview? We'll see you next time.